I'd like to talk to you about another topic we cover in our School Plus Genealogy series. If you're new to the series, let me tell you a little bit about it. I homeschool most of my children. One daughter does attend at the local high school. It was important to me, as we do our history studies, that we incorporate some genealogy studies along with that. I think it's a natural fit. There are many benefits to incorporating genealogy with a history of study. History can seem far distant and disconnected from our lives. However, if we study it in the context of our ancestors and their interactions with historical events and times, it becomes a lot more personal. It's a direct link from us to those past historical events because our family was involved in it. Another benefit is that it gives us more context for our ancestors' lives. They become real people who lived in real events that affected their lives, and they had hardships and trials that we can relate to. So the benefits go both ways. It enhances our genealogy studies and it enhances our historical studies. So through this series, I've already covered several topics such as our Civil War studies and studies about slavery. And today I wanted to cover a new topic about immigration. We have deep roots in the United States. And of course, most of those ancestors came from other countries at some point in the past. So the children and I set out to discover together which of our ancestors were the immigrant ancestors. We started looking at our tree. We looked for the ancestors who were born in another country and died in the United States. And of course, those would be our immigrant ancestors. Each child found a person on the tree that they wanted to focus on, and then I made a nice little printout for them. I'll have a link to this downloadable on my blog. It's an immigrant ancestor worksheet. It has a place for the photo of the ancestor and then lots of facts that they could find online about the ancestor to fill out this form. Now, of course, I helped them and guided them. They were allowed access to my Ancestry account so that they could look details up on the ancestors. They also each have their own family search account and they could look up whatever was available on there. And then whenever they got stuck, I would help lead them to other resources to find the details. Some of the details I asked on this worksheet were when and where the ancestor was from, born, when and where they were born, the year and age at which they immigrated, and then where and when they died. I also asked them to find out how the ancestor came to the U.S., if any other family members or friends came with the ancestor, why they came to the U.S., the place where they settled once they came here to the U.S., what was their occupation, and did they live with other people from the same place of origin? Was the ancestor's spouse from the same place of origin, and did they marry in the United States after they got here, or did they marry in the old country and immigrate together? And then I asked them at the end to add other interesting details. So something fun happened when we did this. At the end of each week, we did this over a course of 2 weeks, so they did 2 ancestors. At the end of each week, they were reporting back on the ancestor that they had studied, and as we finished all the presentations, they started discussing among themselves the patterns that they saw. For example, they usually came, if not with a family member, they usually came after another family member or close family friend had come first, or they came together. So it wasn't usually something they just embarked on by themselves. They also noticed that they tended to settle in areas with other immigrants from the same area. This led us to a discussion of why they would do that. Why would they settle with someone from the same area? And we talked about things like same cultural background, same language, same religious background, and other things that would make them feel comfortable and familiar in their new community in the U.S. with a little bit of reflection of the old country. Now, these are things I did not teach them directly, but as they studied the immigrants' ancestors and we discussed them together, they noticed those patterns, which are common immigrant patterns. It was so wonderful that they were allowed to discover these things on their own. They also realized that a lot of them, more of our ancestors came single and married here in the United States, but they still married someone who was usually from their same place of origin. Now, that's not true in all the cases. Some of our ancestors did come as married couples, but most came single and later married here in the U.S. to someone from their same place of origin. Now, don't think that you have to homeschool in order to do this. You don't. Like I said, I have a high school daughter that has chosen to go to the local high school instead of homeschool. And, you know, we incorporate this with her as well. So one thing is, I constantly ask her what she's doing at school. I think most parents do. And we go over what she's studying in history. And depending on what the topic is, I try and bring in information about our ancestors. For her, it's not as much of a hands-on thing as me relating things to her, but it has made a meaningful difference to her. So for example, when she was studying World War II, we talked about the great-grandparents that she has that served in that war, including several great-grandfathers and one great-grandmother. And that was really interesting for her to learn about. She also gets to hear a lot of what we have talked about during the day at dinner time. We always talk about the ancestors we've discussed in our school studies, and she gets to hear about those. It would also be something fun to do on the weekends together, not as more drudgery work, but as something you do as a project together. So I hope you enjoyed learning about how to incorporate history and genealogy together with your children. I hope you'll try it. It really does make a meaningful difference in their studies. You can learn more about the School Plus Genealogy series at my blog. It's at finleyfamily.org.